Welcome everybody to our Ancillary August webinar. I'm Jeff Finkel, I'm CEO of the Arcview Group, and I'm really excited about today's program, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. You know, traditional businesses may not think much about these issues, the back end, the pipes, or better yet, the infrastructure that runs their businesses. But in the cannabis industry, we think about this a lot. Why? Because the legal cannabis industry lives in this gray area between state legality and federal illegality, which means there's a greater burden on compliance, which is difficult to manage. Also, full service banking relationships are hard to come by. Insurance is expensive, and many of the policies offered cannabis operators are loaded with exclusions that are hard to accept. So our panelists today is going to dissect these topics. They're going to let you know what's available. They're going to let you know what the best practices are for operators like many of you. All right, so before I begin the panel and introduce you to the moderator, I want to introduce you or reintroduce you, as the case may be, to the Arcview Group, which has evolved quite a bit over the last few years, as has the industry in general, and many of you are viewers. So the Arcview Group is a financial services firm that operates 4 subsidiaries and soon a 5th. Arcview Capital, our FINRA registered broker-dealer, which provides investment banking services, operates a crowdfunding site, which, by the way, is a great way to raise capital from individuals. Arcview Ventures, our principal investing group and operator of the Arcview Collective Fund, which is a member-managed venture capital fund with 78 active limited partner members who make all the decisions about how the fund operates. Arcview Management Consulting, our consulting group, offering cannabis license pursuit and growth management services. And Arcview Events and Experiences, one of our newer endeavors. That's our event management group, the operator of our Women's Inclusion Network, the producer of digital content, including the webinar that we're on today, and producer of our live in-person events. And as I'm sure you know, because we've not been quiet about it, we'll be hosting what I think is, I have to check on this, our 51st Investor Forum. I have to actually check on that number, but I do believe it's our 51st. It's going to be this October 19th through the 21st, right here in New York City. We hope to see you all there. It is going to be fantastic. Please go to our webinar and register, or learn more if you have to. And finally, and we're just beginning to operationalize Arcview Marketing Services, which is offering a full range of marketing services to help with branding and lead gen and marketing related activities. Now, none of this would be possible without the support of our strategic alliance partners, all cannabis professionals and great resources for our sector. They include Alpha Root Insurance, Ice Miller Legal Group, Waterton Partners, and PayQuick, all of whom have a speaker on the panel today. So you're going to learn a lot about what they do very shortly as we begin the program. In addition, we have Green Growth CPAs, North Star Financial, providing financial operations management from bookkeeping to fractional CFO services, and in some cases, even tax prep. We have All Leaves, which is point of sale software system, Green Tank Technologies, which produces vape hardware, Work, which provides HR and payroll management services, and Hoodie Analytics, the provider of daily brand and retail intelligence. All right, you've heard enough from me. Let's start the program. Let me introduce you to our moderator today, Sammy Turish, VP of Investments at Arcadian Capital, where she focuses on investments and new deal origination. Prior to Arcadian, Sammy supported the financial services sector at BDSA Analytics, and in the past has supported over 20 PE firms with due diligence activities. We're just pleased to have her. She's wonderful. Take it away, Sammy.
Thanks so much, Jeff. I'm super happy to be here. First time with Arcview Access, at least on this side of the screen or platform or whatever we want to call it. But super excited to be here. So thanks again to Jeff and the whole Arcview team for, as you just heard, really supporting all corners of the cannabis industry, but especially for creating space for these types of conversations. The opportunity to share experiences and insights does so much for community building and education as we all navigate and stand up this special and complex space. So again, I'm Sammy Torres, VP of Investments for Arcadian Capital, an ancillary-focused venture capital firm in the cannabis and broader health and wellness space. And I'm joined by 4 fantastic panelists today, who I'll briefly introduce now and let them turn their cameras on. And they'll share more about themselves and their companies as we start getting into the discussion topics. But joining us today is Sam Porter, partner at Ice Miller's Public Affairs Group and Ohio Government Law Group, a full-service law firm. Ice Miller's a full-service law firm where he's an active member of the cannabis practice, but works across many other sectors. We're also joined by Jesse Taylor, Chief Revenue Officer of PayQuick, a provider of compliant and reliable treasury and payment solutions to the cannabis space. Next, joined by Griffin Baisden, broker at Alpharoot, top insurance provider to the industry. They can cover all your needs, D&O, crop protection, broader management liability. They've got you, and we'll get into that. And lastly, John Ripley, CEO and founder of Waterton Partners, a full suite fractional CFO and accounting services firm for high growth companies, including those in the cannabis space. And as Jeff mentioned, each of our panelists operates on this ancillary infrastructure side of the industry, the backbone, the plumbing, providing services that don't require a cannabis license to operate, but support the primary, typically licensed activities of the industry. And as we said, and we'll just reiterate now, ancillary support and this infrastructure support, whether B2B and supply chain services, risk management, compliance, legal, crucial in all industries, but have a special place in highly regulated industries because there's a higher risk tied to a misstep. In cannabis, as we all know, every state is its own country, really has its own supply chain and regulatory framework that sometimes seems to change day to day. And its Schedule 1 status means that there's larger risk in terms of cost and reputation to not approach banking, compliance, legal, and other considerations with particular care. And again, we've put together this awesome curated panel of experts that are living and breathing these dynamics every day, helping key operators reduce risk, whether that's around potential license loss, sanctions, or just establishing really strong, business practices. And ultimately, all of this is needed to ensure quality products are getting on the shelves for consumers. So super excited to unpack the importance of understanding these challenges and approaching them thoughtfully with the right support and partners today. So a couple rules, I'll use air quotes because I think I'm going to use that term pretty loosely here, but rules as we get going. I'm going to do my best to make sure everyone on the panel has a chance to share their thoughts on each topic we cover. But do ask panelists to keep yourselves muted until you're ready to chime in. When you unmute yourself, that'll be a good clue to me that you want to talk, and we'll also let the audience hear you, which is good. And then for the audience, definitely encourage you to put some questions, thoughts in the chat. Time permitting, we'll do a Q&A at the end, or we put something super juicy and we might even work it in real time. All right, enough from me, enough from Jeff. Let's get started. And I think probably good to set the scene a little bit. So maybe each of our panelists can start by just touching on some of the challenges around providing these infrastructure services to the cannabis space and why we don't see traditional incumbents that support other sectors necessarily doing so in cannabis. And Griffin, right on it with the unmute. Yeah, let's start with you. Let's hear it from the insurance side of the world.
I take direction well. So I heard that. Noted. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be here. Alpharoot, we are a one-stop shop P&C insurance brokerage. We also handle management lines, professional lines, really anything. And we work with a lot of cannabis specific insurers that really only want to see cannabis risk, from dispensaries to cultivators, manufacturers, And they have specific products that can speak directly to cannabis risks, like finished crop coverage, like live crop coverage, things like that you won't see on standard policies. So to start off, like that is the main issue with cannabis operators, like seeing them on standard forms. As Jeff mentioned earlier, like there are a lot of exclusions on standard forms that would prohibit coverage for cannabis operators. So you really want to make sure that you're working with a good retail brokerage and that your carrier is comfortable with the risk that you're providing.
Funny, actually,
Absolutely.
from the banking perspective, I would say that insurance is one of those things that we require, which leads into our biggest thing, which is simply compliance, getting everyone's account docs in a row and making sure that they stay compliant, which is quite challenging, from making sure that they are properly insured to making sure their licenses are up to date, their master service agreements are all up to date, and spell out the actual arrangements between the brand and the manufacturer or a wholesaler and white labeler. We check all these things, and it's often a case where we'll find just discrepancies there and have to guide them through or to walk them through it to help them be compliant. So we understand that there's challenges there, especially as on the West Coast where I am. There is a lot of legacy operators striving to operate in the legal market, and they need a lot of handholding because it's a little messy as they make the transformation.
Yeah, and
David,
I
do
would
you have
say
something to
in
add?
addition,
Or
I
John?
would say in addition, yeah, to the compliance and the regulatory environment is the complexity of the industry. So we are a full stack CFO services team. We provide accounting and financial services to in the industry, both plant touching and non-plant touching. So we work with other ancillary providers as well. And I've seen some non-industry competition trying to enter the market to compete with those ancillary providers, and they've had a really hard time figuring it out due to just the complexity of the industry and how hard it is. This is not a traditional industry. And so when you start to look at, somebody who supports retail from a point of sale perspective, even if they wanted to be in the industry, to adapt to that level of complexity takes a while, and a lot of them have failed just at that adaptation.
I didn't mean to unmute myself, but I can go ahead and say something and add to it. Sam Porter, partner at the law firm of Ice Miller. Glad to be here. Looking forward to chatting with everybody. John, you talked about not a traditional industry. And not only is it not a traditional industry, but it's still illegal. I mean, it's still a Schedule I narcotic, and it's on the federal government has so many restrictions around it, to the point where lawyers, it was unethical and it was not practical for lawyers to even represent clients in the cannabis industry. Our canons of ethics had stated that we aren't allowed to be involved in any events where it's fraudulent or illegal. Well, it's federally illegal. The American Bar Association, though, did come out with some model rules and then left it up to states in order to tweak those rules so that, of course, lawyers can get involved. But it's funny, I have an uncle who works at a law firm down near downtown. He goes, how are you guys even allowed to do this? But I think that our disciplinary councils and Supreme Court realize, look, this is an industry where folks need representation and they need to be advised, because the comments I've also heard from Jeff is, there's a great burden on compliance. Sammy said that there's a high risk tied to a misstep here, and you really need all of these ancillary services in order to run your business so that you're efficient and effective and you're staying within the confines of the law.
Absolutely. Fantastic points across the board. And, one trend I've heard cannabis operators talk about, in particular, I think on the financial institution side of things, there are institutions entering the space or the market without realizing really the true amount of due diligence and maintenance needed to fully serve companies in a compliant and in particular scalable manner. Jesse, I see you're nodding your head a lot. Anything to add to that from the financial and payment side of things?
Yeah, I mean, you said it in succinctly and in summary right there. We see large financial institutions, even large ones, that come in with resources that they think might be adequate, but as you mentioned, it takes people, processes, and technology. And while they may have the technology and money, and they think they have the process, it's really hard to find cannabis bank compliance professionals that are experienced and understand what counts for standardization amongst cannabis banking rules. We've been given some guidance through the Cole memo and understanding state regulations as they pertain to these cannabis operators, but there is no standardization. So it's there's a lot of kind of figuring it out and deciding what you're comfortable with. And banks are very much risk averse businesses. So when you come in and you get over, first of all, the moral objection, which is no small feat, then you need to look at your compliance program and basically build it out mostly from the ground up. You have a compliance portion that's dedicated towards typical S&L. So they're also distracted by the large majority of their business, which is traditional lending. And then you have to think about the bandwidth. As soon as somebody announces that they're going to start banking cannabis-friendly businesses, there is often a flood of newcomers, MSOs and small mom and pop shops and everybody in between that suddenly want an account or want to start talking to you about an account. And you have to figure out how to pair yourself also with these ancillary service businesses. Do you know the appropriate payment processing companies that you want to work with? How much diligence are they going to do with them before you allow a merchant account to have their funds deposited into an account with you that come from B2C transactions? Lending, are you going to do that? Are you going to send money to this company? Who are they doing business with? So there's a lot that's up in the air, and the consequences are quite dire. The vast majority of their revenue is coming from these other sources. So a misstep is huge. A cease and desist letter, is sort of the tip of the iceberg, and invites a level of scrutiny and investigation that most of them aren't really comfortable with. But the biggest barriers to these people getting involved is really just the bandwidth. People coming in, deciding what's appropriate, which is a scary thing for a bank to do. They want to be able to point to a regulator and say, they said I can do this, and it's not really out there to the degree they need it. And yeah, I think those are the things to be mindful of. If you race out and try and get an account with this new entrant, also the other thing is they might change their mind. That's why they often dip their toe in and come in a very small way. So they'll have caps, 10 accounts, 15 accounts, or they'll choose to just do lending, for example, before they even open up an account, and then they might consider it later. So they're going very slow. The ones that are bigger and are considering it, the people that sort of dive in a bit faster are the smaller credit unions and some of these smaller regional banks, and largely at the behest of their current customer base, which is another reason why bandwidth is a problem, and you end up with wait lists months and months long because they're dealing with their core set already. So I went on a rant there, but yeah.
No, but all fantastic points. I mean, you brought a lot in to touch on. Agreed, though, banks typically fall into the ask for permission, don't ask for forgiveness bucket of things. But you also just alluded to the risk of either not approaching these topics in a thoughtful way or approaching them with the wrong partner. Shifting to back maybe to the insurance side of things, Griffin, what common vulnerabilities would you say exist, and what trends are you noticing in terms of where operators are really putting their dollars in terms of coverage, or even just thoughts on ways to secure affordable coverage, which is an issue for many operators as well?
Definitely. Yeah. It's come up several times today already, that insurance is expensive for cannabis operators. And that is very true, unfortunately. The loss history just isn't there that we have for some other industries. And so, as the cannabis market matures and grows over the next few decades, we could see, standard risk or standard insurers taking on the cannabis risk, but nowhere near to that. Honestly, we're very far away. So in terms of where we're seeing our operators put their money, I would say I'm going to pound it into everybody's head right now. Product liability coverage, and general liability coverage are so important for cannabis operators. If you are anywhere in the cannabis ecosystem, and you touch a product, you could be named in a lawsuit if that product caused bodily harm. And the way that most product liability policies are written in the standard market, as I was speaking to earlier, they do have cannabis exclusions or battery exclusions that would preclude coverage for vapes, ingestibles exclusions so that you couldn't get coverage for any type of edibles you sell. And so really having a trusted partner, kind of to Jesse's point, like being able to have a conversation with somebody who knows the space and have them, kind of review your contracts, review your, what does your landlord want? What is your state requiring in terms of minimum limits, and making sure that you have that framework before putting dollars in, so that you have a strategic plan to grow your risk portfolio instead of just throwing money, as some operators might think insurance is. Obviously, I don't think that way because I live and breathe this.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think the exclusions are really, really important, and what Griffin just mentioned. I mean, I've worked with a number of clients where when we review their policies, they have whatever the minimum is, like Griffin said, for their landlord or for their vendors or whatever. But when you dig in on their policies and start to review the actual exclusions, one specific comes to mind where after all of those exclusions, they essentially had no insurance. And so we had to start from the beginning to get a new policy in place. And I'm, as a finance guy, I sort of lean with Griffin where it's not about affordability because it's very expensive until you actually need it. And then it's the best thing you've ever done.
And from a regulator standpoint, and Sam, maybe you can speak to this a bit as well, but what do some of those worst case scenarios kind of look like? Like, are operators really losing licenses for non-compliance, and have regulators gotten more or less aggressive in enforcement as individual and the national markets maturing?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'll answer your second question first. Are regulators more aggressive or less aggressive now? Part of my background is I cut my teeth in gaming law and working in regulatory compliance with the casinos. And it's sort of similar the way you see the cannabis industry growing, and that the regulators for cannabis are new. A lot of them don't have a big background in the area. So they're brand new to it. It's brand new laws. So they're kind of learning and evolving as we are. And so when these programs get rolled out, administrations politically are usually a little bit tighter. And so that's the directive that gets passed down is, hey, look, not on my watch. Okay. Let's be conservative, and let's read the rules narrowly. As they become better educated, the regulators, they start to understand the industry a little bit better, and the goal is for them to become a partner. As I work with our clients and with the regulators, it is hands down the most effective tool is the relationships that we have with the regulator. That's how I'm successful as a lawyer, and that it's having these relationships, picking up the phone, calling them, saying, hey, look, I got this issue with expired product or nearing expiration. The regs say this. Can we work on something here? Can we work on a variance? Can we work on, minimum markups on these things or pushing products? And because you've built this foundation, because you have this rapport or this trust, it just goes so much further. And to answer your first question about, our operators losing licenses, states don't want to get sued. And they don't want to get sued over, programs that are relatively new. And so it almost has to take, in my experience, in the states that I work in, it almost has to be a little egregious on what you're doing to get a license revoked, and actually revoked, not suspended. And, you've got to be completely non-compliant. Maybe you've got products that are just destructive to the patient population or rec community. But when I said, states don't want to be sued, they may work with what are called settlement agreements or consent agreements. And that's almost like a written contract that'll say, hey, look, yeah, I messed up. I misstepped here. Let's put it all down. And I promise that we're going to do better. We're going to have better training. We're going to pay a fine. And it's like a strike necessarily. And if, for folks that are on the call, and if you find yourself in those situations and you have legal counsel, what's important as an operator is that those aren't dinged as regulatory violations or regulatory infractions, but a different type of maybe fee that you're paying. I mean, you can get creative and structure it, because you're going to go as an operator, your goal is to expand. You want to look in other jurisdictions. And so every time that you expand and you go into a new jurisdiction, you're going to have to report that infraction. And it's going to be a part of your license application. So, our job as attorneys is to protect you. And it's not just to look narrow focused on, I got this expired product, what am I going to do? But also to think down the road and, well, what does that mean if you have a violation for you as you continue? So I think that the regulators can't be friendlier now, but it's all about the relationships. It's about building that foundation, and it'll just go a long, long way. And if you're looking for counsel, when you're interviewing counsel, focus on that and talk to them and say, tell me about, what's important to you, because a bulldog's great if you're looking for a litigator. You're looking for someone to just, rip the other side apart. But when you're looking for regulatory counsel, it takes almost this fine dance between the law and the politics.
I like to say, I think representation by somebody like Sam is so important. I do have experience in the operator side as well as the financier side. And I can't tell you the number of times, particularly out here in California, how I'd hear about the CDTFA coming in for a surprise inspection and looking to cross-check manifests with what was in the local seed-to-sale tracking system, to your point, or example rather, on expired product. And making sure that it's disposed of correctly, cross-checking inventory. So those inspections do happen. So be mindful and have representation in advance of that happening potentially to you.
Yeah, fantastic. Navigating cannabis, it's an art and a science and a political, let's use headache. That seems slightly politically correct at the very least. But no, of course, a theme we keep touching on here is just cannabis is different than a lot of other industries. And one of the main aspects of that, again, are the state to state differences and guidelines. Maybe each of you can speak a little bit from your own perspectives of some best practices for remaining compliant for operators that do, MSOs that operate across multiple states.
Sure. I mean, from a banking perspective, obviously, set up your next operation in accordance with the state mandated guidelines, and then also work with your attorney, right? Who's in consultants who are helping you navigate the new market. There's the expertise and help out there that you need to set up this new business in the correct way, and getting ahead of for example, your banking needs in a place would be great before you go ahead and set up operations. Go talk to Griffin, go talk to Sam, talk to me, get everything set up before you start, so that once you get going, you can really focus on your operation, your business, which is the business of either growing or selling marijuana or some derivation of the plant. The last thing you want to be doing is trying to juggle all of that at once, or worse yet, playing catch up, and you find yourself with a violation and need a quick rectification. And if you plan to expand even further, as Sam mentioned, it's on your permanent record. So I would say just plan ahead, get in touch with your ancillary service providers, your insurance codes, your lawyers, your outside third-party CFOs, and then your bank, so that you're ready to go once you break ground.
Definitely. Yeah, the amount of non-operational entities that we write coverage for is astounding. We'll have, as long as we have, the address, the state that you're going to be operating in, projected revenues, things like that, you can get an idea of what that coverage will cost, and kind of build that into your budget from the start. So it's not a surprise, when you have to pay, $10,000, $20,000 for coverage, which unfortunately is what it costs. So knowing that upfront before you have all those other costs is important, because you really do need the coverage.
Understanding the tax implications as well. Talk to a good CPA, make sure you have somebody that knows your business well. If you are setting up a new entity in the other state, that has taxable implications as well. So making sure that your tax, your knowledge of the tax situation that you're putting yourself in is understood.
Sammy, I'll add something if that's all right. From my standpoint, what I would find out is, first, can you legally expand even to the jurisdiction that you want to go in? And it's you're going to have a business model, you're going to understand what your roadmap is, and you'd say, oh man, it would be great if we could get into Ohio, let's say. But are there even licenses for you to get into Ohio? So I think first is legally, what are the opportunities for you, and sort of outline what that process looks like. Then, I brought this up before as I was thinking about it, but as you're making a business decision of what jurisdiction to go into, I think that the political wins are also really important for you to understand. Are you moving into a conservative state? Are you moving into a state where a governor opposes all things that are cannabis, or a legislature? Before you submit any requests to the states, in writing, lobby, maybe get a lobbyist, understand what the dynamics look like in there, because maybe you think that this is just going to be a great opportunity for you. And then you get in, you're like, holy smokes, this is a total headache. I've got a cultivator space that's, let's call it 20,000 square feet, and I want to operate at 100. And you find out, well, that's just never going to happen. You're in a red state now, and it's an administration I've got to wait, 4, maybe 8 years now. So I think just understanding the political wins of what that looks like. And then, if you get comfortable with that, you need to make and understand the relationships with the locals too, in the local jurisdiction. Are you going to do a greenhouse? Are you going to do indoor grow? Maybe those are things that are limiting resources, water, and energy. I mean, we have clients that run into energy issues all the time. Supply chain issues are a real thing for folks. So it can get complicated, but all here to help.
I'm just going to add, don't, on that point, and understand your local market, don't ignore the local cannabis organizations. They can be great in terms of building that network and relationship with those regulatory authorities that might need to grant you a little extra water, for example, or maybe a little extra power for that plot of land.
Absolutely. Fantastic points all around. I think so far, one thing we can say very simply and easily is cannabis is complex. And I think everyone on the line can hear how important it is to have people like the folks on this call kind of in your back pocket as you're thinking through these decisions, expansion decisions, growth decisions, strategic decisions. They have huge impacts on your business overall. And John, I know you have experience supporting many types of businesses now and prior to cannabis across supply chain, sales optimization, healthcare. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your thoughts on kind of how you incorporated those past experiences, but how cannabis is different. In particular, at least something we're talking about with our portfolio is the need for these fractional CFO capabilities, especially today given the macro environment right now. Cash is harder to come by. Our companies, the industry and the companies they're in still need to grow, but balance sheets need to be a little bit tighter. Would love your thoughts on kind of the trends you're seeing in any and all of these areas.
Yeah, I think bringing in sort of traditional industry expertise, and we still do work with non-cannabis clients. I think there's a lot of differences, and I think starting with how you start your business and how you get funded, right? Having an investor that knows the cannabis space and knows what to expect from your path to growth is really important, versus a traditional industry investor that's trying to dip their toe into cannabis, because cannabis retail is completely different from traditional retail. Cannabis cultivation is completely different from traditional cultivation. And so having an investor that understands that and understands that your path is going to be a little bit different, that's sort of where you start, right? Is how do you fund your business? How do you grow your business? And then beyond that, I would say the regulatory environment around cannabis for accountants and CFOs is substantially different, but I hate to say it, but it's actually good that we have something like a 280E to give us guidance on accounting, versus other new industries. We work with some NFT companies and things like that there is no accounting guidance whatsoever. Now, I'm not saying 280E is a positive in any way whatsoever. It's a massive negative, let's be clear. But it at least gives somebody like me and my team some guidance to work off of. And so having that knowledge and being able to build on that foundation is really, really, really important. But everybody should understand what that means and what 280E does and how it impacts your business, especially those investors, especially stakeholders in the business, because it does have a massive impact on your relative performance and profitability. I mean, the Forbes article that just came out with that shout out to my client Grasslands who helped push that along, did I think a good job at highlighting the complexity of the regulation in the environment and the relative impact on the bottom line for companies. We have companies that are very well operated, perform very well, and their profit margins are substantially different if they were in a traditional industry instead of in cannabis. And having people around your business that understand that and can help guide you through that, but also help guide your stakeholders through that is massive.
And I'll just do one plug. And John, I know you could explain this as well, but for folks who don't know, the 280E is a reference to the IRS tax code, where businesses are allowed to make deductions. And because cannabis operators are illegal, they can't make those same business deductions. So one of those things I had to learn as I'm not a tax attorney, but just want to make that plug for folks that may not know.
Now, always love a definition. There are some great charts, graphs out there that show the impact of 280E on, John, to your point, the bottom line, that show like a stacked chart of, what the bottom line looks like today and what it would have if 280E didn't exist. Maybe we can send one around after this or something. But this is really introducing another important challenge in the industry, because 280E exists because of cannabis's Schedule 1 status, right? And we've alluded to a couple other ways that Schedule 1 status impacts things. But Jesse, maybe coming back to you, would love to hear your thoughts on kind of some of the challenges around operating, but even just safety as well, that cannabis has to be an all cash industry, right?
Yeah, it's a huge problem. We've heard stories about dispensary owners getting robbed or even killed in some of these markets, and just the amount of firepower that they have to have around their farms, cultivations, distro shops, and retail shops. It's not great. You have these young people going around with tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, in the trunk of their car, driving to and fro a farm, for example, to a manufacturing plant, and their lives are at risk. And then the business is, unfortunate to say, but even the business is at risk in case some of the money gets lost, in case that person chooses to swipe a few bills. Or it's just simply miscounted. There's a lot of risk involved, both for personal safety as well as just for proper money handling. So it's tough. And what we're seeing and what we have seen in the past couple of years is the industry that are more mature, they're migrating more towards banking, but not in the right way. So what we see is, I think it's estimated that about 70% of cannabis businesses operating today have some form of cannabis, or not cannabis friendly banking, but some form of bank account from which they do things like ACHs, wires, cut checks, so on and so forth. The vast majority of those accounts, however, are coming from traditional banking services. And it's a risky thing to do because it puts your entire operation at risk from a payroll perspective, being able to pay your vendors. If you would like such things that John alluded to, such as expansion capital, working capital, a term loan, invoice financing, it used to be where they would factor those or give you these loans with a Bank of America account or Wells Fargo account, but they wisened up and realized that, hey, if they lose their account, I don't want to go and pick up that sack full of cash. So cannabis-friendly banking is actually now mandatory for, as far as I've been able to tell, across every lender, cannabis-friendly lender that I've come across throughout the nation. If you are planning on setting up a retail shop or already have one and are interested in such things as debit cards and credit cards, A, do your homework. B, they will also require those funds to be deposited in a cannabis-friendly bank account. So we're moving in the right direction. I think it's no, some of these things and challenges are more widely known amongst the more established cannabis friendly or legalized states. The concern I have is, especially with these newer states that haven't been around quite as long and haven't caught wind of the problems that go along with dealing with cash and how to go about it, how to account for it, that they'll start making the same mistakes. Hopefully, through such efforts like this, their learning curve will be dramatically reduced. But yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah, I don't, from our perspective, I don't even want to start talking about the accounting around cash because that just gives me the shivers every time I think about it. But I do want to reiterate Jesse's point around access to capital. I mean, and maybe back to your previous question, Sammy, we've closed in the last month, some working lines of credit for two of our non-cannabis companies that were essentially layups for companies that are either newly launching or barely profitable. And that in cannabis, to be able to do that in cannabis, even with cannabis friendly lenders, is still really, really hard. If you're launching a new cultivation or a new lab and you need equipment financing, traditional industry, that's a little bit easier to get than it still is in cannabis. So, that's, I think, going to be one of the changes to the regulatory environment that could really benefit cannabis from a banking side, is opening up more access to just basic working capital, a small revolving line of credit, a corporate credit card, not even being able to take credit cards like at the retail facility, but a corporate credit card, equipment financing, all of those things that are going to be key to continuing this industry's success.
Absolutely. don't worry, I'm not going to ask everyone their thoughts on whether or not safe banking is going to pass. I'm sure we've all answered that question 15 times already this week, so we're going to skip it for now. No, I think we could all talk about these topics all day long, but there's only 15 minutes left, and we've gotten a couple questions in the Q&A that we want to touch on. Before that, this is one question I sort of always like to ask panels, but I'd love each of you to share, what's something you wish you understood about cannabis and this broader infrastructure when you got going? And what's either the best advice you've received yourself or that you would provide the audience today?
I may be the newest to the cannabis space on the panel, so I went through this in January. But just learning the most I could about cannabis, the cannabis industry as a whole, was really helpful for me. Understanding the verticals and how they all, work with each other, interstate regulations and versus federal regulations and how it's illegal at the federal level, and just really understanding what our landscape looks like right now in the cannabis space. And that's really where I started. So that I had a lot of great mentors that told me where to start, so I didn't have to fumble too much. But highly recommended for everybody else who's on the call.
I think Griffin also just offered to be a mentor to anyone, is what she was saying there as well.
Hit me up.
That's what I heard. I mean, I can only echo that. Understanding the markets that we're serving, both from a maturity standpoint, and I mean that from the financial sophistication and operational sophistication standpoint, as well as the health of the market. Looking at a state like Oklahoma, for example, where people have, there's thousands of people that have been awarded licenses that are trying to prop up organizations. I think making sure, I know things like that going to the market, and understanding the mentality of what an operator over there looks like versus one in California. John, I got one for you where this former client of mine was making about 60 million a year. And I'm like, how much are you actually making? It's like, oh, I put more in than I take out. So it's just understanding the mentality and then the challenges, right, that they have to go through, both from a margin compression standpoint and from just being able to pay people in cash. Their relationships with their vendors is challenging. An ability to take in capital, like everything about what they're doing is challenging from the financial perspective. Knowing that going in, I think would have made me appreciate the brave entrepreneurs a little bit more.
So I'll go next. I've had some interesting jobs before I came to work at the law firm. And one of the jobs I had is I was legal counsel to the governor in Ohio, so worked closely with the governor. And he appointed me to the Liquor Control Commission. So I was the executive director of the Liquor Control Commission, so a former regulator. And we regulated alcohol throughout the state of Ohio and such. And I remember the chair of the Liquor Control Commission after our hearings, and we would speak to folks, who had violations for their bars at a restaurant. And she would always say to some of the more egregious ones is, look, there are a million ways that you can get in trouble, and basically say, make sure you've got good counsel, good guidance. The industry is growing at just a rapid pace right now. And from my perspective, what we're starting to see is, those initial applicants who may, kind of put in this box as kind of like the mom and the pops or whatever, or someone even more sophisticated, they're starting to pack up their tent and they're selling and they're moving on. It's not a bad thing because folks can certainly make a lot of money off of it. But depending on the jurisdiction that you're in, you may not be able to sell, or you may have to wait a certain amount of time, or the deal could be complicated. And all of our ancillary services, everything that everybody here on this call does is, I'll say lawyers, yes, lawyers can cost a lot of money, but the good ones and the good folks that are on this call can end up making you a lot of money and then also saving you a lot of money and a lot of headaches. So that's just something that I would share is, make sure that whatever decisions that you're making for your business, that you seek out some of the great talent that's on this call or out there before you make some of these really big decisions.
Sammy, remind me of the question. What do we wish we knew when we got into the industry? Is that?
Yeah, or best
Yeah.
advice you've received or best advice you'd give right now. So you could take it in a couple of directions, John.
Yeah. I mean, I think I don't want to reiterate too much of what everybody else said. I'm always fascinated with the maturation of the business, from figuring out how the sort of non-legal banking finance stuff. I've been around since in the industry for a while, and things like operators figuring out how to line cans so that the CBD or the THC content doesn't degrade over time. I mean, that was years ago, but just the innovation and the scrappiness of the industry to continue to advance in the face of that, of all of these challenges that we're all talking about. I mean, that I think is a key component of the industry that we all talk about, is the scrappiness of the industry, and it's going to continue to be scrappy. It's going to have to continue to be scrappy to continue to grow. And I don't think that there's really anything external that's going to save the industry. I don't think the industry needs saving. So things like safe banking and claim and all of those sorts of things are not, they may make it easier to operate, but the scrappiness of the industry is what's gotten us to this point, and it's going to continue.
Yeah, agreed. And I think, I think that's really the nth degree is it's going to continue. I think we're just scratching the surface of, in particular, the innovation we will see in this space. Fantastic, responses and conversation from all of our panelists here. In the last couple of minutes, let's address some of the questions from the audience. So first one here, this might be a good one for you, Griffin. From Rena Jackson, I'm launching a topical brand in California and don't have a license yet. An insurance carrier said he can't give me a quote until I go into production, yet I need proof of insurance before I can get a local permit and go into production. Thoughts here?
Too, honestly, that's you need insurance to have the license. You need license to be able to get the insurance. It's a never ending circle sometimes. And a lot of times when you're working directly with a carrier, they do have those hard lines in the sand. And, going back to Sam's point earlier, it is really about relationships in the cannabis space. And so having a trusted partner as a retail broker on your side, and then having that broker that has relationships with wholesalers in the area, that have good relationships with cannabis underwriters, is so important. So making sure you have that strong ecosystem around you of people that, will pound the pavement until they get it done, which is kind of the mindset we have over at AlphaRoot. So Raina, I dropped my email. Feel free to reach out if you're still having issues. We'd love to help if we can.
Alludes a little to what John said as well. The hustle, it's the scrappiness, the hustle. It's really all part of surviving and getting started in this space.
Definitely.
Another question, and I said I wouldn't ask our thoughts on if SAFE would pass. That's still true. But Lloyd Santiago brought in a great question. And Jesse, I know you've already put some thoughts into the chat, but maybe you can reiterate here and pile on a little bit more. But the question is, will the passage, so we're assuming it passes, will the passage of safe banking lead to greater assurance and industry trust among lenders and investors and I think broader financial services players?
I mean, yeah, I attempted to answer it in the chat, but don't hold your breath expecting any sort of watershed moment where people just pile in all over the place. It's still illegal. Safe banking just means that the FinCEN will be less likely to slap the wrist of the bank institute that chooses to get involved. If they even choose to get involved after safe banking, hopefully eventually, someday maybe, passes. So assuming though that it does, and that a bank is comfortable then providing the services, it just means that they're less at risk of losing their capital, a little less. I mean, I'd actually be interested to hear Sam's take as the counsel on the panel about whether or not he thinks his clients, prospects will have additional security around the safety of their funds, because that's what it comes down to. From a bank perspective, I'm going to do what the regulator tells me. If they come after me and they say your funds are forfeit for non-compliance, I got to do what FinCEN tells me.
Yeah, it's going to create a really interesting paradigm, I think, too, because it's so, I mean, right now with the states and being so heavily, well, it's only regulated by the states, but I think it does create, better assurances, trust in the industry. We have already what are cannabis REITs, and those are real estate investment trusts. But I think you might see even a little bit more proliferation of things like that, and just a little bit, I almost want to say like other creative financing, other creative opportunities for people than just the basic, I got a whole bunch of cash and what am I going to do with it? And how do I get it, process it and things like that. So if we did this after Safe Banking Act passes, we might have more speakers to this and to add on to the iterations of that. But it's going to create new opportunities for people. John, please.
Yeah. I mean, I would maybe reframe it a little bit, because we work a lot with financiers and banks, and I don't know that it's necessarily a lack of assurance and trust, although safe banking certainly wouldn't do anything to hurt that. I would say it's a general lack of understanding, and because safe banking is in place, many of these lenders and financiers and institutions don't know about the cannabis space. So there are some, like I know SVB, Silicon Valley Bank, has dipped their toe into cannabis a little bit. So if safe banking were to pass, they might be a quick mover in the market, but for the most part, they're going to be slow movers, right? They're going to still have to learn about the market. They're going to have to figure it out. They're going to have to learn about the financials and the various different components. So, my expectation and has not changed for the last few years since safe banking was first introduced is, even when it passes, there's still going to be a pretty substantial learning curve for any of the traditional industry players to figure out the cannabis space. So even if safe banking passes, I think it's, you have a lag time for when it really takes effect and has an impact on the industry. Absolutely.
And again, just why what all of you are doing every day is so crucial now, and even after, if and after, the regulatory shifts do happen. I think that's just about our time today. So I learned a lot. I'm sure everybody in the audience did, because I live and breathe this stuff, and still when I talk to you guys, I come away knowing things I didn't before. So thanks again to each and every one of you and everyone in the audience. Jeff, I'll let you take things away and sign us off.
Great. And wow, Griffin, John, Sam, Jesse, great job. Thank you so much for your insights. An amazing job, Sammy, as captain. I'm so glad you took the route of investment management in this industry rather than pursuing other career opportunities. Rumor has it that you wanted to become a dentist.
Yes, right. The dentistry path. Yes.
And thank you again to our viewers. Over 30,000 of you have joined our program since we've launched in 2020. It's really great to serve you. We're thrilled to announce some upcoming in-person events, so save the following dates on your calendar. September 22nd, we're running an Arcview Access Beverages Biz Breakdown will be the focus of that webinar. And of course, our Arcview Access Cannabis Investment Summit live in New York City, October 19th through 21st, and part 2 of that in Coral Gable, Florida, this December. So again, I think we have a link in our chat where you can look up. Let's see if we have it there. You know what? I am just going to quickly copy and paste it in for you. There it is. Okay, great. That's where you can find out information on the events. And again, Thank you, everybody. Great job, and we will see you soon.